Good evening, everyone. I'm here to give you a presentation this evening on a tutor that on a topic that's important for all of us tutors, no matter how often or how long we tutor, and that is making introductions. So let me at this time share my screen. Okay, so my presentation tonight is Breaking the Ice, Getting to Know Students, and it's presented by myself, Shauna McKelly. And I'm going to tell you a story about one of the most difficult introductions I ever did. I had been working as a tutor at the location where I currently work for about 3 years at that time. And I had gotten a reputation as a little bit of a troubleshooter. So they tended to give me the students that either didn't have tutors or didn't succeed with other tutors. And one day I found a note in my box that these two women, Helen and Tina, I'll call them, needed a tutor. They needed a tutor for the next 6 weeks in math. And I'm watching them as they enter the office where I was. And I was sitting in the back of the area. So I had a chance to observe them as they walked in from the front. And they were chatting with each other and they seemed relaxed. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but they got to the entryway of the office where I was. And one of them said to the other one, I hate math. That's what Helen said. And she plunked herself down in the chair. And then her friend, not to be outdone, Tina said, I'm terrible at math. And this exchange went on between them as if I wasn't even there. And I waited a couple of beats to see if they would introduce themselves to me, and they didn't do it. So I piped up and said, hello, horrible at math, how are you? And hello, I hate math, how are you? And that kind of took them aback because this was not just a sort of statement. This had been something between a declaration to the universe and and uh, a statement of challenge to me. So I took it upon myself in the next few minutes to try and get at what was actually happening with these two. And it's not the typical story of what usually happens in a tutoring session, but what I noticed is that they were both very tense. So they were sitting with their arms crossed. They were um, they were sitting very straight and they weren't volunteering much. And I said to them, look, I'm not telling you that you have to enjoy math when this is over, or that even that you'll enjoy coming to tutoring sessions. But I really would like you to sort of stave off the language of I hate math for the next while because it's not very helpful. And I talked to them at some length about what they needed, and I hope to in this presentation reenact some of that for you and hit some points that are important for everyone. The first one, as I alluded to briefly, is body language and nonverbal communication. I mean, these ladies pretty much had the whole package. They had the verbal communication, they had the body language, they had the nonverbal cues. I mean, they had the lack of eye contact, they had the closed body language, they had the very unequivocal statement, um, and they also had the message behind the words, which is something to the effect of, I hate math because I don't understand it. and I've never understood it, and I've never been in a position where somebody helped me to understand it. And I'm terrible at math because I don't understand what the procedures are and how it's relevant. And that was something that I gleaned from conversations with them. This is something that when you have an introduction like this, you can't um, glean all that you need to in one session or one interaction with them. You have to create a safe space. And by that, I mean a space where they can tell you something like that, and you're going to respond to it. And you may set some boundaries with them, but they're safe enough. It's safe enough for them to tell you that. So it's safe enough to tell you this is not working, or I don't like this, or something like that, so that they feel like they can communicate with you. And the more closed somebody is, the more important that is to do. And you have to let the students, in some sense, lead. And by that, I mean, you have to take your cues from them, which means in a first interaction, you're really looking at the cues. You're looking at maybe what they like, or what they tell you, what animates them. You're looking for those things, not so you can so much exploit them later, but so that you can tailor your interactions with them in ways that will be relevant to them. And I think that any introduction, hopefully you won't have one that's quite as dramatic as that was. Any introduction has three goals to it. You want to give a student a sense of who you are as a person. And I don't necessarily mean that you're going to give them your life story or even your experience, because they're going to read our bios for that. And they might ask us questions depending on how old they are, or the parents might ask us questions, but they're going to take a sense of who you are away from the interaction, in terms of how you interact to them and how you make them feel. People might forget what you say. People might forget what they hear, but they're never going to forget how you made them feel or how they felt in that interaction. So strive to make it a safe place for them. Strive to make it something where you can get some useful information and where you can um, be committed to them. The second thing that you want to do is get a sense of who the student is. And I've talked about that before. When I was interacting with Helen and Tina after their rather unforgettable outburst, it turned out that Helen had always struggled in math. She had never really found success and she had had tutoring before. She had never really found success. She'd always struggled. And it's easy to see in a sense like that if you always struggle with something and you don't really understand it, and then you're required to sit in not just one class, but two classes, five classes of math, depending on the level that you're on, the longer you do that, the easier it is to see how a student might not like what they're doing, and how they might get a sense of hating it because it's miserable, it's painful. Um, it turned out for Tina was really more about not so much that she didn't understand how things went. She did understand some concepts, but it turned out for Tina that she really just had extremely poor mechanics. And so she didn't have good organization. She didn't organize her problems well. Um, and so what I worked on with Tina over the coming weeks was, yes, understanding the concepts, but also organizing her work and seeing where the algorithms, where the procedures went. And when she started to understand that, she started to figure out that maybe I don't have to hate it. Now, I'm not asking a student to love it. There's subjects that no matter how we study, we're never going to love them. But if you can give a student a sense of this doesn't have to be as painful as you think, then you can get a sense of who they are. And the other thing is, you want to get information about how you might be able to help that student. So over the course of, this is not something that I did over the course of a single tutoring session. This is something that took a series of sessions, but I tried to take a couple of things and really go forward with that. Now, once you kind of get a student to open up, you have to think there's different types of students. There are shy students, there are anxious students, there are disinterested students. And so if a student is shy, they're generally not going to give you much information. And in a case like that, it's probably not a good idea to directly engage them and put them on the spot. You might comment on something that they're wearing, like a baseball cap or a sports jersey, or maybe you see a motif on their notebook. Maybe it's a puppy motif, maybe it's a surfing motif, and try and engage them with something like that. Maybe you see something in the room that's their favorite object, or ask about something that they like. Get them to talk about something about them so that it gets them out of their head. And sometimes that'll give you a chance to bring the subject back. How can I help you with your fractions? How can I help you with your history, whatever it might be? If the student is anxious, you generally get one of two broad reactions with anxious students. Sometimes anxious students are the ones that come in and they know what their problem is. They know how anxious they are, and they tell you, I have a lot of anxiety. I don't take tests well, all of that. And they'll tell you their whole life story in 5 minutes. Other anxious students are a lot like the shy ones, and you get nothing out of them because they climb up on you. They don't want to talk to you. And in that case, you kind of give them a sense of who you are and what you might want to do, and ask them, what are your goals? What can I help you with? Again, creating that safe space and engaging in a conversation where you can learn together. And the third part of this is figuring out how to help them. And again, you use what you learned in the introduction about them. You use the information that you got. You you try to look at any other materials that the student may have brought with them, and you figure out what the student wants to know. Yes, you have a certain amount that you have to teach them, but you figure out what the student wants to know and you start there. What I try to do at every tutoring session is I try to create some kind of small success. So if the student comes to me and says, I just don't like math, I hate it all the time, then what my focus is let me create an environment in this tutoring session that shows them that I'm not asking them to love math in the next 5 minutes or the next hour. But I'm going to create an environment where I'm committed to helping them learn what they need to know and what they want to know, and start there. If you start with what they want to know and you try to create a small success for them, which could just be, okay, I'm usually anxious and I wasn't anxious. Or it could be, I finally got to tell somebody about my anxiety and I know they're going to help me. Some small success. You can build on that small success. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but you give it your best and it's your job to help them. So I hope these pointers are helpful to you and I thank you for your time. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to take them at this time. Thank you.